So this is the iPhone SE, Apple's newest budget iPhone. It was released a couple of days ago. I actually only unboxed it yesterday, but so far I'm really loving it. Feels great in the hand, Touch ID works great, but historically, whenever Apple make a budget phone, an area where they often seem to cut back is of course with the camera. And as somebody who loves to take photos with my phone, that got me thinking, how does the camera on the SE perform? Is it still great, only really lacking that second focal length, or is it seriously flawed? Let's find out. So seeing as there's no one definitive type of photography, I've decided to break it down into sections where we can really see where this camera shines, where it falls short, and if there are any problems along the way. I'm also going to throw in some shots from the iPhone 10 and the iPhone 11, just so we can see how it looks relatively though. Let's go take some photos. Alright, so the first thing we're really going to be testing with this phone camera is landscapes. Now, this is an area I like to take photos of on my phones a lot, and on the previous iPhone 11, I found it to be really good. Most of that's due to that ultra-wide camera, and while Apple haven't included it on here, they have included their standard one-time zoom, which I personally think is a good thing. See, the ultra-wide and the telephoto are both very niche focal lengths, and because there is only one focal length on this thing, I think it's a good thing that they went with the general focal length. Things that we typically look for when we're taking landscape photos are dynamic range and detail, and so while I can't really go anywhere at the moment to take some nice photos, I'm lucky enough to live in a place where I can go for a walk, take some photos of nice landscapes, and then bring them back here. So that's exactly what I'm gonna do. Alright, so that was good. We're going to be taking a look at those in a moment, along with how they compare to some of the photos I've taken on both the iPhone 11 and the iPhone 10. It's not going to be side by side though, I don't really do scientific on this channel. We're going to take a look at those in a minute, but for now we're going to be moving on to our next category, which is detail. Now, this is a pretty important factor for smartphone cameras because, let's be honest, you can't really fit a giant full-frame sensor in one of these, so making sure that your phone sensor can produce a nice detailed image is important. In this section, we're also going to be testing for distortions, and to do this, I like to take photos of trees. Honestly, a good wide angle of a tree, easiest way to spot any distortions. We're also going to be doing some close-up shots for detail and overall sharpness. So yeah, let's go take some photos. So next up, and in a suitable location, we're going to be testing the color science. We're going to find out how this camera replicates colors. Is it too saturated? Is it too contrasty? Or is it just right? In this section, we're also going to be testing how well it handles skin tones. And of course, we're going to be testing out how well the HDR works. Does it do a good job of preserving those highlights? Or does it just like totally flatten everything? Alright, so next up, we're going to be talking background blur and portrait mode. However, there are some pretty severe limitations of the portrait mode on this iPhone SE, which we will be talking about later. But for now, let's go test them. Alright, so the next test is going to be the low light test. And when I previously tested the iPhone 11, because of that night mode, it actually did really well in this test. So while I'm not expecting the iPhone SE to do as well, I am still looking forward to seeing how it's going to work. Also, I'm going to be throwing in some results from Neural Cam, because I am interested to see how it works with that A13 processor. Alright, let's take some photos. Okay, so photos are all well and good. However, a big part of a camera nowadays is, of course, the video quality. So I'm going to shoot a quick sequence now. I'm going to be using a variety of frame rates and, of course, some slow motion. Let's put away the GH5 and see how this thing does. Okay, so finally, we're going to test the editing possibility with these photos. Can they hold up to some editing, or do they start to fall apart instantly? Let's find out with a time lapse. Okay, so now we're going to be talking overall what I think of the photography experience using the iPhone SE. And first of all, I'd like to talk about the app experience. So first of all, for the most part, I do like the modernization of the app. I like how you can now swipe up and you can change the aspect ratio, you can disable or enable live photos. Same with the flash, you can set a timer, all of that. Great. However, as somebody who takes a lot of burst photos, I really don't like the hold for video feature. Do I think I'll get used to it? Yeah. Do I like it? No. Everything else about the formatting of the app though, love it. Okay, so now let's take a look at the photos, the first being the landscapes. Honestly, in terms of taking photos of landscapes, I think this does a great job. In terms of dynamic range, I was very impressed. Overall, I do find the Smart HDR to work well. Sometimes it does still look a little plasticky, but honestly, I think that's just an HDR thing. Even when I shoot HDR video on this camera, I do notice it does sometimes get a little bit flat looking. Just noticed I was on auto ISO the whole time, so it was trying to overexpose me. Hopefully it wasn't too bad though, and we can carry on with the correct exposure. Going back to the landscapes, I have found them to be very sharp. Not quite as sharp as they were on the iPhone 11. I think that's almost definitely down to the camera hardware itself though. The A13 chip in the SE does a fantastic job of handling that sharpening. It looks tack sharp, but it still manages to look natural. And yeah, overall, in terms of sharpness and shooting landscapes, I think this looks great. Leading on from this, we're going to be talking detail. I found that on the iPhone SE, there was a good level of detail. As I said, it was nice and sharp, but if you take a look into those typically demanding areas, it doesn't look overly muddy. And so when I brought these photos into post-production, I did have that little bit of leeway where I could just like adjust the colors and the exposure. Always nice to have that as an option because it just takes your photos from looking, yeah, pretty good to near professional standards if you edit right. Obviously, I've said it before, I don't think a phone camera can ever replace something like this, but that's not the purpose of this phone. In fact, I'm pretty sure all my recent Instagram posts have been taken on my phone. Run them through Lightroom and on a social media platform, it is very difficult to tell the difference. Going back to detail, I also didn't notice that much distortion. Sometimes it did look a little distorted, especially in situations with like loads of tree branches. I did notice a tad of chromatic aberration in a couple of these, which is, hold on, according to Wikipedia, in optics, chromatic aberration is a failure of a lens to focus on all colors at the same point. It's caused by dispersion. Essentially, it looks a little bit distorted. As I said though, I barely ever had this problem and it was very light when I did have it. It could almost definitely be corrected for. In fact, looking at these, it's probably more of an HDR thing. It does look like chromatic aberration, but I think that might just be caused by the HDR. So yeah, on that particular shot where I did have the sky in the background, I did get a little bit of distortion, but most of the time it was absolutely fine. If somebody who knows more about this than me is watching this video, please leave a comment about what this might be because I do want to know. But yeah, overall, as I said, detail is good here. Following on from this, we have color. Honestly, it looks pretty good. There's a good level of saturation and contrast without it looking over-processed. And as I said before, there is an option for a little bit of post-production. Don't get me wrong, it's not going to be like raw editing. It is still a JPEG or an HEIC codec. But regardless, you stick Lightroom Mobile or Snapseed on this thing, you will be able to pull off some pretty nice edits using this thing. Yeah, overall colors, I think they look pretty good. Next up, we have background blur and portrait. And honestly, in my opinion, this is probably one of the weaker areas of this camera. First off, in terms of general background blur, you're not going to be getting that much regardless. There are two main elements that cause background blur: aperture and sensor size. Now, in terms of the SE, this thing has an aperture of f1.8, which is actually pretty fast. However, due to the size of that sensor, it's really not going to be like bokeh central. In fact, even on a camera like this Micro Four Thirds sensor, as we can see, I don't actually have that much background blur. Now, granted, this is on f4, but in terms of organic background blur, sensor size can play a huge part in how blurred your background is actually going to be. So to overcome this, a lot of phone manufacturers have actually started developing technology that artificially blurs the background. It gives you that nice full frame look while managing to avoid dedicating like a quarter of the back of this thing to just camera. Gotta say though, I would honestly prefer that. Honestly, you can keep the 4 or 5 lenses phones have started putting in nowadays. I would sacrifice all of that for one lens and just a bigger sensor. It is probably gonna happen. There's gonna be a phone company that develops a phone with like a full frame sensor. And if you used an iPhone released in recent years, then you may have tried Apple's version, which, as I said before, is called portrait mode. However, on the iPhone SE, it is pretty badly limited. While it does still have that aperture slider that I love. Seriously, I wish the iPhone 10 had that. That is such a useful feature. It can only actually be used on people. Honestly, on my iPhone 10 camera, portrait mode was probably one of my most used features. Honestly, I don't know why Apple decided, hey, it should only work on people. It doesn't even work on pets. Well, there's something that I thought was cool, was that they seem to have added animal autofocus. Now, this has been a feature on some of the higher end DSLRs for a while now, but I actually think it's quite cool that they added this. Anyway, going back to portrait mode, on both cameras, it does work well when you're taking photos of people. Still, I really don't like how it was limited in this way. Finally, for the photo side of things at least, we have low light. Now, Apple famously chose not to include their low light technology on this iPhone, which is a shame. I did say in my initial impressions video of this thing, I would have loved to see the night mode. It was one of my favorite features of the iPhone 11. Seriously, if you never tried it, it's magical. Alternatively, you could watch my video testing it up there. However, Neural Cam is still an option, and a lot of you actually requested that I tested it with the iPhone SE, so that's exactly what I did. Side by side with the iPhone 11 in these two images, I find it very difficult to tell the difference. Honestly, I am going to test this further, and while stock low light on this thing isn't all that impressive, yeah, honestly, with this iPhone SE, best Neural Cam experience I've ever had. Finally, in total now, we're going to be talking video. Now, obviously, I love video, and I find on smartphones, it is generally a little bit hit or miss. I was actually pretty impressed with the video quality coming from the SE. I'm not going to be talking too much about video specs in this one. I am going to be saving that for the review. I found that as long as you got that HDR to engage, you could get some really good looking dynamic range out of this thing. I tested pretty much every frame rate, 4K, HD. I even tested the selfie camera. Now, something I do want to say is you do lose these slow feeds from the front facing camera, but yeah, not exactly a deal breaker. Compared to the iPhone 11, you do also lose that 4K front facing video though. However, most of the time I'm shooting video on this thing, I am using that main camera, and the quality out of this thing is actually pretty good. I found it edited nicely, and I did have a little bit of room in post to do a little bit of color grading. Always good. The 4K out of this thing does look good, and the slow motion looks like, well, phone slow motion. I did find the 120 FPS to be a little bit better quality than the 240 FPS. So if you do prefer quality over slowness when it comes to your slow motion, that could be an important factor. However, if you want the maximum quality on this thing, I do suggest shooting in 4K. And yeah, overall, as I said, video quality out of this thing is solid. All right, so in conclusion, I'm honestly more pleased with this camera than I thought I was gonna be. Now, that's not to say it doesn't have its shortcomings, namely like the portrait mode, the lack of night mode, and I don't like the new way of getting a burst photo. Obviously, I also would like another focal point. In my unboxing and first impressions video that I posted yesterday, I said I was looking forward to using this phone even more. And honestly, the camera experience this thing's given me has taken that to a whole nother level. Seriously, this could end up being one of the best value iPhones ever made. All right, guys, so that's it for today. I do want to take this time to say thank you all so much for the support on the videos recently. I remember earlier this month we were celebrating 25,000 subscribers, and we're already at 28,000 subscribers. That is ridiculous. All right, guys, so as I said, that's it for today. Let me know what you think of this thing's camera, and as always, thank you for watching. Remember to like the video if you want to see more content like this, and smash that subscribe button. I'm done for now, and I will see you guys in the next one.